My name's Sophie Herxheimer, and I've been invited to Winchester Poetry Festival to be Artist Poet in Residence, which is very honourable and delightful for me. I've had a really nice weekend. I've been listening to a lot of people's stories. I've been drawing them and listening really, and collaborating and making kind of visual poems out of the nub of what they tell me, because obviously people tell you quite a lot and then you try and pull it into a shape, which is what of course poetry is made out of too. And the other thing we've been doing is making collages, so I've brought my big bag of scraps from London, and people have been working their way through it a little bit, making collage poems which are kind of related to the work I did at Trelawn's, where I worked with the students on making their own poetry flags, which were really to reflect who they were, what they think, what they like, and what they like about themselves, and how they are in the world. And they made these beautiful, wild, bright-coloured, interesting collages. And so I wanted to offer that as another thing that people could make themselves. So there's some things people could make themselves, some things I could make with them. And then at 5:30 today, I'm going to do a poetry reading of my own poems. And that's about it, really. Well, it's a job I've invented myself, because I've always been a painter and a poet, but I've never really found good, it's been a struggle for me all my life, trying to find out ways in which words and pictures can coexist and not fight, because they've got a tendency to fight. And I don't really like straight illustration like a poem about a spider with a picture about a spider. It makes me feel a bit bored and grumpy. So I like the idea that pictures come in at an angle to the words, that all our ideas are expressible possibly through words and pictures, and maybe if we juxtapose them in a clever way, they'll come to life and become just as real as they ever were in our imaginations. And I've been inspired by people like William Blake, who use text and image as if they're the same thing. And I really began on this journey when I was commissioned to make a gigantic tablecloth for the Thames Festival in 2007. And I decided to decorate it with food stories collected from Londoners, because I thought they'd be icebreakers at each place setting, and that people would sit down and it would be like a choral work where somebody from the Congo would have written down their memory of a spaghetti bolognese next to somebody from Cornwall who was telling me a story about eating cereal. And I didn't want to make it worthy. I didn't want to say we own, have photographs of people who show how ethnically diverse they were, or how they were from different backgrounds or age groups. I wanted it to just speak for itself as a very cosmopolitan and diverse bunch of voices. So it was important to me to try to get the voice right of each person who spoke to me. And that's what I do by the listening. I try not to make up the phrases that they say. I try to write the phrases that they say, but of course I'm trying to also précis it so that it becomes more tight and more essential and more nub-like and more poetic. And that's a kind of fascinating process for me. And it is poetry because people's stories are so individual and unique. And quite often people will say, I don't know what to say, I haven't got a story, or, oh, I'm feeling very boring today. And then they sit down and they tell me that their granny used to cook hedgehog in a pan over the fire. Or they tell me that they were, like this lady, she said she was feeling quite boring, but actually she told me a beautiful story about a Japanese lady ornament that her mum and dad had, that she just loved. And in a way, when she revealed more about her background and how she was an only child, you could see that this Japanese lady was like a magic sister. Somebody to look at in the evenings, who wasn't your boring old mum or dad or your classmates at school. And that everything people tell you about is a sort of metaphor for them. And that maybe she is beautiful and maybe she's also breakable. We all are. And similarly, all the stories I hear are like this. They have layered meaning. I've been very happy here. It's been a very busy, full weekend. And the work of listening, as I'm sure you all know, is quite intense. Especially if you're working on listening, that you're then also turning into something quite swiftly and immediately. And I enjoy the performative side, I enjoy the spontaneity, I enjoy all of it, but it's intense. And I've also really got a lot out of listening to the poets here, and also meeting poets that I've long admired. So I already know some of the poets that I really admire, but some of them I've just read. And so putting names to faces and hearing what people have to say and hearing the variety of voices here has been another way of learning and another way of being present to voices, really, and the incredible brilliance of poetry and sharing poetry with other people.